A bullied kid befriended the new transfer student, unaware she was a famous actress in disguise. The words flashed across Ethan Parker's mind like neon signs as he pressed himself against the cold metal of the school lockers, trying to become invisible. Another day, another bruise forming on his skinny shoulder where Trent Dillinger had slammed him moments ago. 15 years old, and Ethan had already mastered the art of strategic invisibility. Eyes down, shoulders hunched, walking the long routes between classes to avoid the hallways where the popular kids congregated. The February air hung heavy with cold inside Westlake High, despite the humming radiators that lined the walls. Ethan adjusted his glasses, cracked at the corner from last week's accident, and clutched his physics textbook tighter against his chest like a shield. 3 more classes until freedom. 3 more hours of careful navigation, of calculated silence, of existing in the periphery. His heart rate had just begun to slow when Principal Harmon's voice crackled over the intercom. Attention students, please welcome our new transfer student joining us for the remainder of the school year. We expect you all to make her feel at home at Westlake. Ethan barely registered the announcement. New students rarely altered the delicate ecosystem of high school hierarchy. They either ascended quickly to the upper echelons of popularity or found their place among the invisible ones like him. It made no difference to his daily survival calculations. Until 5th period, Miss Winters, their English literature teacher, was mid-sentence in her analysis of The Great Gatsby when the classroom door opened. The girl who stepped through seemed to bring light with her, as though the fluorescent bulbs overhead suddenly burned brighter. Ethan looked up from his notebook, pencil pausing mid-word. "Ah, you must be our new student," Ms. Winters said, adjusting her reading glasses. "Class, this is Olivia Reed. She's joining us from, where was it, dear?" "California," the girl answered, her voice soft but clear. "Los Angeles." Something about the way she stood, confident yet not arrogant, shoulders straight but not rigid, caught Ethan's attention. Her dark hair fell in loose waves past her shoulders, and she wore simple jeans and a forest green sweater that made her eyes seem impossibly bright, even from across the room. There was nothing flashy about her, nothing that screamed for attention, yet every eye in the classroom was fixed on her face. "Well, welcome to Westlake, Olivia." "Ms. Winters smiled. "There's an empty seat next to Ethan." "Ethan, would you raise your hand, please?" His arm felt like lead as he lifted it slightly, heat rushing to his face when Olivia's gaze met his. The universe had a cruel sense of humor, placing someone so evidently destined for the popular table next to the school's favorite punching bag. He slid his backpack from the empty chair beside him and stared determinedly at his notebook as she crossed the room. "Hi," she whispered as she settled beside him, the scent of something like vanilla and rain following her. "I'm Liv." "Ethan," he mumbled back, not daring to look at her directly. "Welcome to hell." The words slipped out before he could stop them, and he immediately regretted it. Great first impression. But to his surprise, she didn't recoil or look offended. Instead, a small laugh escaped her, quiet enough that only he could hear it, genuine enough that he finally looked up. "That bad, huh?" she whispered, her eyes crinkling at the corners. He shrugged, still waiting for the moment when she'd realize her social mistake in being friendly to him. "Depends on where you land in the food chain." "And where do you land?" she asked, opening a pristine notebook. Her handwriting, he couldn't help but notice, was neat but not overly perfect. Slightly slanted letters that seemed to dance across the page. "Bottom feeder," he replied, attempting humor to mask the truth. "You'll figure out the ecosystem pretty fast." Miss Winters cleared her throat pointedly, and their whispered exchange paused as she continued her lecture. But throughout the remaining 40 minutes, Ethan felt a strange, unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest. Olivia Liv had smiled at him, had talked to him like he was a person worth acknowledging. It had been so long since someone new had looked at him without the lens of his reputation coloring their perception. When the bell rang, he fully expected her to gather her things and disappear, drawn to the magnetic pull of the popular crowd who were already watching her with assessing eyes. Instead, she turned to him. "What's your next class?" she asked, slipping her notebook into a worn leather messenger bag that looked expensive in an understated way. Chemistry," he said, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Room 143. I've got world history in 152. Is that near you?" The reality of Westlake's social dynamics suddenly pressed down on Ethan's shoulders. He glanced toward the door where Trent Dillinger and Madison Wells were already watching. Their eyes narrowed at this unexpected development. "Look," Ethan said quietly, "you seem nice, but you probably don't want to be seen walking with me." "Not if you want to," Have actual friends here. Liv followed his gaze to the door, her expression shifting subtly. For a moment, something flashed in her eyes. Not pity, which he was accustomed to seeing, but something sharper, almost like recognition. Then she did something that would change the course of Ethan's life, though he couldn't possibly know it then. She smiled, a full, radiant smile that transformed her entire face, and said loudly enough for others to hear, "Well, I'd like to think I can choose my own friends. Lead the way to the science wing, Ethan Parker." The first week of Liv's arrival at Westlake passed in a surreal blur for Ethan. Each day, he waited for the natural order to reassert itself, for Liv to be absorbed into Madison Wells' orbit of beautiful, untouchable girls, or for her to simply stop acknowledging him in the hallways. But each day, she defied his expectations. She sat with him at lunch, pulling out homemade sandwiches from wax paper with such casualness that it made their shared isolation seem like a choice rather than a sentence. She asked questions about his interest with genuine curiosity, her eyes lighting up when he hesitantly admitted his love for astronomy and the hours he spent with his second-hand telescope on clear nights. "That's amazing," she'd said, leaning forward across the cafeteria table. "I've always loved the stars, but I've never really known what I was looking at. Just that they're beautiful. They're more than beautiful," he'd found himself saying, the words tumbling out with unexpected ease. "They're stories. History we're only seeing now because it took the light so long to reach us." She'd rested her chin on her hand, watching him with those bright eyes. "I'd love to see them sometime. The way you see them, I mean." It was the first time in years that Ethan had spoken about his passion without being mocked. The first time someone had looked at him with interest rather than disdain or indifference. And despite the whispers that followed them through the hallways, despite the increasingly dark looks from Trent and his friends, Ethan found himself unfurling like a plant that had been kept too long in the dark. But by the beginning of the second week, the natural laws of high school began to exert their pressure. Madison Wells intercepted Liv at her locker Monday morning, while Ethan was getting books from his own locker down the hall. "So," Madison said, her voice carrying just enough for Ethan to hear, "we're having a party Friday night at my place. My parents are in Aspen until Sunday." "You should come." Ethan pretended to be searching for something in his locker, even as his heart sank. This was it, the moment when the brief, unexplainable friendship would dissolve. No one refused Madison Wells' invitations. Her parties were the gatekeepers to Westlake's social heaven. "Thanks for the invite," Liv replied, her voice pleasant but cool. "Who else will be there?" Madison flicked her perfect blonde hair over her shoulder. "Everyone who matters. Trent, Jake, Sophia, the whole lacrosse team. It'll be epic." There was a pause, and Ethan couldn't help glancing over his shoulder. Liv was arranging books in her locker, her expression thoughtful. "Is Ethan invited?" The question hung in the air, so unexpected that Madison actually laughed. "Parker? Why would—" She stopped, something calculating entering her eyes. "Oh, I get it. You're being nice to the charity case. That's sweet, really. But you don't have to pretend at my party. You can just be yourself." Ethan turned back to his locker, his face burning with humiliation. He wished the medal would simply swallow him whole, transport him to some parallel universe where he wasn't eternally, irrevocably the charity case. "I am being myself." Liv's voice was still pleasant, but there was an edge to it now, and myself enjoys Ethan's company. "So thanks for the invitation, but I've actually already made plans for Friday night." The silence that followed was so thick Ethan could feel it pressing against his skin. He didn't dare turn around again, but he heard Madison's voice drop to a register that promised nothing good. "Look, new girl, I'm trying to help you here. You're pretty enough to fit in with us, but you're making a serious social mistake. Parker's a nobody. Worse than a nobody, he's a target. And if you keep hanging around him, you'll be one too." The warning was delivered with such casual cruelty that Ethan felt his chest constrict. The worst part was that Madison was right. Whatever inexplicable reason Liv had for befriending him, she deserved to know the consequences. "Thanks for your concern," Liv replied, and Ethan was startled by the steel beneath her polite tone. "But I've been to enough high schools to recognize the difference between real friends and convenient ones. I'll take my chances with Ethan." The bell rang, saving them all from Madison's response. Ethan quickly shut his locker and hurried toward his first class, not waiting to see the aftermath. His mind was spinning. Been to enough high schools? How many schools had Liv attended? And more importantly, why would anyone, especially someone as effortlessly magnetic as Liv, choose him over the protection of Madison's social circle? He didn't see her until lunch period, when she slid into the seat across from him with a bright smile that showed no signs of the morning's confrontation. She unwrapped her sandwich, turkey and avocado today, and took a bite before noticing his questioning stare. "What?" she asked, brushing a crumb from her lip. "Mom, why did you do that?" he blurted out. "With Madison this morning, I heard what she said to you." Liv's expression softened, because she was wrong, and kind of terrible. But she was right about one thing. Ethan insisted, lowering his voice. "Being friends with me is social suicide. He swallowed hard, the admission painful, even after years of acceptance. "I'm at the bottom for a reason, Liv. I'm the weird, skinny kid with the broken glasses who talks about stars too much and can't throw a football to save his life. That's not going to change." "Why should it?" she asked simply. The question caught him off guard. "What? Why should it change? What's wrong with being interested in stars? What's wrong with being who you are?" Ethan stared at her, genuinely bewildered. "Everything's wrong with it. At least here." Liv set down her sandwich, her expression suddenly serious. "Can I tell you something? Something I haven't told anyone here yet?" He nodded, uncertain where this was going. "This is my 5th high school in 3 years, she said quietly. "I've been the new girl so many times I could write a manual on it. And you know what I've learned?" Ethan shook his head. "That there are Madisons and Trents everywhere. And that most people are so busy trying to be what they think they should be that they forget who they actually are." She leaned forward, her eyes intent on his. "But you know who you are, Ethan. That's rare. It's actually kind of amazing." The sincerity in her voice made something in Ethan's chest ache. He wanted to believe her, wanted so badly to see himself through her eyes, even for a moment. "Why do you move so much?" he asked instead, diverting from the weight of her words. A shadow passed over her face, so quickly he almost missed it. "My mom's job. It requires a lot of travel." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Anyway, about Friday night, I meant what I said to Madison. I already have plans." "You do?" Ethan asked, surprised. "Well, I was hoping I would. There's supposed to be a meteor shower, right? The Lyrids? You mentioned it last week." The memory rushed back to him. He had mentioned it, almost in passing, never imagining she'd actually remembered or cared. "I was thinking," she continued, a hint of uncertainty in her voice now, "that maybe you could show me. With your telescope. If you want to, I mean." The invitation hung between them, fragile and unexpected. Ethan felt something shift inside him, a tiny seed of trust beginning to take root despite all his defenses. "Yeah," he said finally, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, I'd like that." Her Friday night arrived with perfect clarity, the April sky swept clean of clouds by a brisk spring wind. Ethan spent the afternoon in a state of nervous anticipation, cleaning the lenses of his telescope and checking the weather forecast every 30 minutes. His mother watched his frenetic energy with quiet amusement, helping him pack a thermos of hot chocolate and extra blankets into his battered JanSport backpack. "So this friend," she said casually as she handed him a container of homemade cookies. "She's interested in astronomy too?" "Not exactly," Ethan replied, carefully wrapping his star charts in a plastic sleeve to protect them from dew. "But she wanted to see the meteor shower." His mother smiled, the lines around her eyes crinkling. She'd been working double shifts at the hospital for years, ever since his father had left, and fatigue was etched into the corners of her face. But genuine happiness brightened her expression now. "It's nice to see you excited about something," she said softly, squeezing his shoulder. "About someone." "It's not like that, Mom," he protested automatically, heat rising to his face. "We're just friends." "I know." She nodded, but the knowing look in her eyes made him fidget. "That's even better." At 7 o'clock, Ethan wheeled his telescope out to the small hill behind their apartment complex. It wasn't ideal. The light pollution from town dimmed the fainter stars, but it was the best he could manage without a car to take them further into the countryside. He set up carefully, aligning the scope and laying out blankets on the still damp grass. At 7:15, doubt began to creep in. What if she'd changed her mind? What if this had been an elaborate setup all along? A new form of humiliation orchestrated by Madison and her crowd. At 7:30, he heard footsteps approaching and turned to see Liv making her way up the hill. She wore jeans and a puffy blue jacket, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Relief washed over him in a wave so strong it left him momentarily speechless. "Sorry I'm late," she called as she got closer. "I had to wait for my mom to finish a call. She worries if I don't check in." She reached the top of the hill and looked around at his setup, her eyes widening. Wow, this is amazing. Professional. Pride warmed his chest as he gestured to the telescope. It's not really professional, just a second-hand celestron, but it has decent magnification. It looks impressive to me, she said, settling onto one of the blankets he'd laid out. So how does this work? Will we actually see the meteors through that? Ethan shook his head, sitting down beside her but careful to maintain a respectful distance. Not the meteors, no. They'll be visible to the naked eye, just streaks of light across the sky. The telescope is for looking at planets, stars, nebulae, objects that stay relatively fixed. Show me, she said, pulling her knees up to her chest and looking at him expectantly. Show me something amazing. For the next hour, Ethan guided her through the night sky, pointing out constellations and adjusting the telescope to reveal Saturn's rings, the craters of the moon, the smudge of light that was the Andromeda galaxy. With each new sight, her genuine wonder peeled away another layer of his carefully constructed defenses. How do you know all this? She asked as they leaned back on the blankets, waiting for the meteor shower to begin in earnest. Did your dad teach you? The question caught him off guard. No, he said after a moment. My dad left when I was 9. He wasn't really into, well, anything I was into. I'm sorry, she said softly. That was thoughtless of me to assume. It's okay, Ethan replied, surprising himself with how much he meant it. My mom got me a book about stars that Christmas after he left. I think she was trying to distract me, but I fell in love with it. Saved up for 2 years to buy this telescope from a guy who posted it on Craigslist. Liv was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on the sky above them. My dad died when I was 11, she said finally. He killed cancer. It was quick, only 3 months from diagnosis to the end. I'm sorry, Ethan said, the words feeling inadequate against the weight of her loss. Thanks, she whispered. It's why we move so much, my mom and I. She says it's for work, but I think, she paused, swallowing visibly. I think sometimes places just hold too many memories for her. Understanding passed between them, a current of shared pain that somehow brought comfort rather than sadness. They lay in silence for several minutes, the night growing darker around them, stars emerging like secret messages in the velvet sky. Oh, Liv suddenly gasped, pointing upward. Was that one? A streak of silver-white light cut across the northern sky, leaving a ghostly trail that faded within seconds. Ethan grinned. That's one. They'll come more frequently as the night goes on. True to his prediction, the meteors began to appear more regularly, sometimes several within a minute. They watched in companionable silence, the occasional wow, or did you see that one, punctuating the quiet night. During a lull, Liv turned her head toward him, her expression thoughtful in the dim starlight. Can I ask you something? Sure, he replied, though a hint of wariness crept back into his voice. Why do you let them do it? The bullies, I mean. Why not fight back? The question struck a nerve, and Ethan felt himself tensing. You think I haven't tried? Trent has 4 inches and 50 pounds on me. Fighting back just makes it worse. I didn't mean physically, she clarified quickly. I meant, you're so much smarter than they are. So much more interesting. But you hide it. You make yourself smaller around them. The observation was so accurate, it left him momentarily speechless. When had she noticed that? How had she seen through his carefully cultivated invisibility? It's easier, he finally admitted, the truth painful to voice aloud. Being invisible hurts less than being seen and hated for what they see. Liv propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him with an intensity that made his heart stutter. What if you were seen and not hated? What if you were seen and appreciated? Another meteor streaked overhead, illuminating her face for a brief second. The earnestness in her eyes, the slight furrow of concentration between her brows. Something shifted in Ethan's chest, a door opening to a possibility he had long ago stopped considering. I don't know, he whispered honestly. I don't remember what that feels like. She smiled then, sad and sweet. Maybe it's time to find out. The moment hung between them, fragile and significant, before another burst of meteors drew their attention skyward. They watched in silence, but something had changed. A new understanding, a promise of possibility that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Later, as they packed up the telescope and blankets, Liv helped him wrap the eyepieces carefully in their protective cloth. Thank you for tonight, she said, handing him the thermos they had emptied of hot chocolate. It was perfect. Even though you had to miss Madison's epic party? He asked, only half joking. Liv laughed, the sound clear and genuine in the quiet night. Especially because I missed Madison's epic party. She gestured to the sky, The telescope, the hill, was real. That's always better than epic. As they walked down the hill together, their shadows stretching long in the glow of the distant streetlights, Ethan felt something unfamiliar stirring inside him, something that felt dangerously like hope. Monday morning brought a shift in the atmosphere at Westlake High. Whispers followed Ethan and Liv as they walked to English class together. But there was something different about them now. Less mocking, more curious. Word had spread that Liv had deliberately chosen stargazing with Weirdo Parker over Madison Wells' party, and the unprecedented social decision had created ripples of confusion throughout the student body. "Ignore them," Liv said quietly as they took their seats, the weight of stares pressing against them from all sides. "They'll find something new to talk about by lunch." But lunch brought its own surprise. They had just settled at their usual isolated table when a hesitant voice interrupted their conversation. Is it okay if I sit here?" Ethan looked up to see Zoe Chen standing beside their table, lunch tray in hand, dark eyes nervous behind her rectangular glasses. Zoe was in his AP physics class, brilliant, quiet, and as socially invisible as he was. Before he could recover from his surprise, Liv smiled warmly. "Of course. I'm Liv." "I know," Zoe said, sliding into the seat across from them. "Everyone knows who you are." She glanced at Ethan. "We have physics together. Your explanation of quantum entanglement last week was really good." "Thanks," Ethan said, still bewildered by this unexpected development. He couldn't remember the last time someone from class had voluntarily spoken to him outside of mandatory group work. The three of them fell into a surprisingly easy conversation about their classes, and Ethan found himself relaxing as Zoe and Liv discovered a shared love of classic films. By the time the bell rang, they were debating the merits of Hitchcock versus Kubrick with the comfortable familiarity of old friends. "Same table tomorrow?" Zoe asked as she gathered her things, a hopeful note in her voice that Ethan recognized all too well. "Definitely," Liv confirmed with a smile. As they walked to their next classes, Ethan nudged Liv gently with his elbow. "What's happening?" he asked, only half joking. "Is there something in the water?" "First you, now Zoe." Liv laughed, but her eyes were serious when she looked at him. "Maybe people are just starting to see what I saw right away." "Which is what, exactly?" he challenged, still not quite believing this strange new reality where people voluntarily sought his company. She stopped walking, turning to face him fully in the crowded hallway. "Someone worth knowing," she said simply. "Someone real." The words settled over him like a warm blanket, both comforting and terrifying in their sincerity. He wanted to believe her, wanted it with an intensity that scared him. But years of careful self-preservation made trust difficult. "What are you doing after school today?" she asked, changing the subject as they resumed walking. "Nothing special. Homework." "Why?" "I was thinking maybe we could go to River Point Coffee. They have this amazing banana bread, and it's quiet enough to study." The invitation was casual, but Ethan immediately thought of the cost. The coffee shop was known for its premium prices, well beyond his limited budget. I should probably just head home." He hedged, embarrassment making his voice tight. "I promised my mom I'd help with some things." Understanding flashed in Liv's eyes, but mercifully, she didn't press. "Another time then." But the next day she arrived at school with 2 slices of banana bread wrapped in wax paper. "Since we couldn't go to River Point," she explained, handing him one during lunch, "I thought I'd bring River Point to us." The gesture, small but thoughtful, caught him off guard. He accepted the bread wordlessly, something thick and unnameable catching in his throat. "You didn't have to," he finally managed. "I wanted to," she replied simply, as if that explained everything. And somehow it did. The weeks that followed unfolded with a surreal quality that left Ethan constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. His tiny social circle expanded cautiously. First Zoe, then Aaron from Robotics Club, then Maya, who shared his love of obscure science fiction novels. They gravitated to the lunch table that had become an unexpected island of acceptance in the turbulent sea of high school politics. At the center of it all was Liv, whose quiet confidence seemed to create a protective bubble around them. It wasn't that the bullying stopped entirely. Trent still shoulder-checked Ethan in the hallways occasionally, and Madison's cutting remarks still found their targets. But somehow, with friends beside him, the wounds didn't cut quite as deep. And through it all, something was changing inside Ethan himself. He began to straighten his shoulders when he walked. He raised his hand more often in class. He stopped taking the long routes between classes. Small acts of courage that accumulated day by day, nurtured by Liv's unwavering belief in him. They fell into comfortable routines, Study sessions at the public library, weekend movies at the discount theater, star watching on clear nights. Ethan's mother began keeping extra snacks in the pantry for when Liv came over, though Ethan noticed that Liv never invited him to her home. When he asked about it, she explained that her mother worked unusual hours and was intensely private, a reasonable explanation that nonetheless left him with a vague sense of imbalance. "Does she know we're friends?" he asked one afternoon as they sat on his living room floor, textbooks spread around them. Liv looked up from her history notes, a strange expression crossing her face. "Of course she does. She's glad, actually. Says I seem happier here than at the last few schools. But she doesn't want to meet me," Ethan observed, trying to keep his tone neutral. Liv sighed, setting down her pen. "It's not that. My mom is just protective. After my dad died, she kind of closed ranks. It's just been the two of us against the world, you know?" He did know, in a way. After his father left, he and his mother had formed their own two-person unit, navigating the aftermath together. But they had never closed themselves off from the world entirely. "She'll meet you eventually," Liv promised, reaching out to briefly squeeze his hand. When the timing's right. The casual touch sent warmth spreading up his arm, and he nodded, letting the matter drop. But a small seed of curiosity had been planted, one that would grow in unexpected ways. The catalyst came 3 weeks later, on a rainy Tuesday in late May. They were huddled under the overhang outside the school entrance, waiting for the downpour to subside enough for them to make a run for the bus stop, when Ethan's phone buzzed with a news alert. He glanced at it absently, then froze, his eyes fixed on the headline. "Breaking: Olivia Lawrence leaves hit show, Crystal Falls mid-season." Below the headline was a photo of a girl with Liv's face, but not quite Liv. This girl had longer, highlighted hair styled in glossy waves, professional makeup, and the practiced smile of a celebrity. But the eyes, those were unmistakably Liv's eyes. "Ethan? What's wrong?" Liv asked, noticing his expression. Wordlessly, he turned the phone toward her. Her face went pale, eyes widening as she saw the article. For several seconds, neither of them spoke, the only sound the drumming of rain on the metal overhang above them. "I can explain," she finally said, her voice barely audible above the storm. "You're Olivia Lawrence," he stated flatly, still struggling to reconcile the image on his phone with the girl standing before him. His friend, his confidant, the person who had changed his entire world in less than 2 months. "You're an actress. A famous one." She winced at the hardness in his voice. "Yes, but it's not all I am." Students began pushing past them to exit the building, several doing double takes as they noticed Liv, then the photo on Ethan's phone. Whispers immediately erupted, phones appearing in hands as the connection was made. "We need to go somewhere else," Liv said urgently, glancing around at the growing audience. "Please, Ethan, let me explain." But a strange numbness had settled over him, a protective fog against what felt like an enormous betrayal. "Was any of it real?" he asked, the question escaping before he could stop it. "Or was I just some kind of experiment? Research for a role?" Pain flashed across her face. "How can you even ask that? Of course it was real. You're my friend, Ethan. My best friend. Your best friend who didn't even know your real name," he replied, hurt making his voice sharper than he intended. "Your best friend who you've been lying to for 2 months? More students were gathering now, the news spreading like wildfire through text messages and whispers. Trent pushed his way through the crowd, his phone in hand, eyes darting between the screen and Liv's face. "Holy shit!" he exclaimed loudly. "It is you! You're Olivia Lawrence, from Crystal Falls." He turned to the growing audience. "She plays Avalon Pierce. My sister watches that show religiously." Liv flinched at the volume of his voice, taking a half step closer to Ethan. "Please," she whispered. "Can we just go somewhere and talk?" But the crowd was closing in now, excited voices overlapping as recognition spread. "Can I get a selfie? Why are you at Westlake? Are you filming something here? Is it true you're leaving the show?" The questions came from all directions, smartphones raised like weapons. Ethan stood frozen, watching as Liv's face transformed before his eyes, her features arranging themselves into a polite, practiced smile that looked nothing like the genuine warmth he'd come to know. It was as if a mask had slipped into place, revealing that another mask had been there all along. "I'm sorry, I don't have any comments about the show right now," she said, her voice somehow both friendly and firm. "I'm just trying to be a regular student." "With Parker?" Madison's incredulous voice cut through the noise. She had pushed her way to the front, her expression a mixture of shock and calculation. You could have been friends with anyone. Why him? The question hung in the air, giving voice to Ethan's own deepest insecurity. Why him? What possible reason could someone like Olivia Lawrence, beautiful, talented, famous, have for choosing him as her confidant? Liv's mask slipped for a moment, genuine anger flashing in her eyes as she turned to Madison. Because Ethan is real, she said, echoing the words she'd said to him weeks ago. Because he saw me as a person, not as this. She gestured to the phone surrounding them, to the hungry eyes consuming her every movement. But Ethan was already backing away, the hurt and confusion too overwhelming. I didn't see you at all, he said quietly. The words meant only for her, but carrying in the sudden hush that had fallen. I saw who you pretended to be. Before she could respond, he turned and pushed his way through the crowd, ignoring her calls of his name as he ran into the rain, welcoming the way it disguised the hot tears that had begun to fall. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of noise and confusion. By morning, the story had spread beyond Westlake High to local news outlets. Teen TV star Olivia Lawrence found attending public school under assumed name. Camera crews parked outside the school, reporters accosting students for quotes about the famous actress in their midst. Ethan stayed home, claiming illness, unable to face the circus that awaited, unable to face Liv and the complicated tangle of emotions her deception had unleashed. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from their small friend group and from classmates who had never spoken to him before, all seeking information, confirmation, details. And from Liv, a stream of texts and voicemails that he couldn't bring himself to open. I'm sorry. Please let me explain. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. You're the only real friend I've made in years. Each notification made his chest ache, but the hurt was too raw, the sense of betrayal too profound. Had she been laughing at him all along? The pathetic bullied boy who was so desperate for connection that he never questioned why someone like her would choose someone like him. On the second day, as he lay on his bed staring at the ceiling, his mother knocked gently on his door before entering. Her expression was a mixture of concern and determination. There's someone here to see you, she said softly. Ethan sat up, alarm coursing through him. If it's Liv, Olivia, whatever her name is, I don't want to... It's not, his mother interrupted. It's an older woman. Says she's Olivia's mother. She's very insistent. Curiosity temporarily overrode his hurt. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded, following his mother downstairs to the small living room where a striking woman in her early 40s waited. She wore simple but expensive-looking clothes and minimal makeup. Her dark hair, the same shade as Liv's, pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Despite the casual attire, something about her bearing screamed, "Not from around here." "Mr. Parker," she said, extending her hand as he entered. "I'm Catherine Lawrence. Thank you for agreeing to see me." He shook her hand automatically, hyper-aware of his mother slipping tactfully into the kitchen to give them privacy while remaining within earshot. "I'll be direct, Ms." Lawrence continued, gesturing for him to sit. "My daughter is devastated. She hasn't eaten or slept properly since what happened at your school." A spark of vindication flared in Ethan's chest, immediately followed by guilt. Despite everything, he hated the thought of Liv's suffering. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said stiffly, "but I don't understand what you want from me." Catherine Lawrence studied him for a moment, her gaze uncomfortably perceptive. "I want you to listen to her explanation. That's all. Just listen." "She lied to me," Ethan said, the hurt bubbling up again. "For months. About everything." "Not about everything, Miss," Lawrence corrected gently. "Not about the things that mattered." "Her name mattered," he countered. "The fact that she's famous mattered. Those seem like pretty basic things to be honest about in a friendship." "Ms." Lawrence sighed, settling back in her chair. "Do you know why we came to Westlake?" The question caught him off guard. "For your job?" A sad smile crossed her face. "In a manner of speaking, Olivia was breaking down, Ethan. The pressure of the show, the constant scrutiny, the so-called friends who only wanted proximity to her fame. At 16, it was crushing her. She was having panic attacks, losing weight, unable to sleep. The doctors called it acute stress response, but what it really was loneliness." Her words pierced through some of Ethan's anger, creating space for understanding to seep in. "Coming here was her idea, Ms." Lawrence continued. "She begged me to let her try being normal for a while, to go to a regular school where no one knew who she was, to make friends who liked her for herself, not for Avalon Pierce or Olivia Lawrence or any of the characters she's played. So it was all an experiment. Ethan said, but the accusation sounded hollow even to his own ears. No, it was survival. Ms. Lawrence leaned forward, her expression earnest. The first week here, she called me after school crying. Not because someone had been mean to her, but because someone had been kind. You had been kind without wanting anything in return. Do you have any idea how rare that is in her world? The memory of that first day flooded back. Liv sitting beside him in English, asking about his next class, smiling at him like he mattered. She wasn't supposed to make close friends, Miss. Lawrence admitted, a hint of rueful amusement in her voice. That wasn't part of the plan. We agreed on a few months of anonymity while she recovered her equilibrium, then back to Los Angeles before the next season began filming. But then she met you. A lump formed in Ethan's throat, making it difficult to speak. Why me? The question that had haunted him since the beginning, the one Madison had voiced in front of everyone. Why him out of all the students at Westlake? That, Miss, Lawrence said gently, is something only Olivia can answer. But I can tell you this. In 3 years of traveling from set to set, from school to school, I have never seen my daughter as genuinely happy as she's been these last 2 months. Whatever connection you two have, it's real, Ethan. The only false thing was the name she used. She stood smoothing invisible wrinkles from her slacks. She's leaving tomorrow, back to Los Angeles to deal with the fallout from quitting the show. She told me not to come here, said you needed space and she would respect that. But I thought you deserved to know the whole truth before you made your final judgment. From her purse, she withdrew a small envelope and placed it on the coffee table. Her real number and a letter. Read it or don't, that's your choice. But know that in Olivia's world of pretense and performance, what she shared with you was the truest thing in her life. With those words, she nodded a goodbye and let herself out, leaving Ethan alone with the envelope and the echoing weight of her revelations. For a long time, he simply stared at it, emotions warring within him, hurt, confusion, longing, and beneath it all, a stubborn, persistent affection that refused to be extinguished by betrayal. Finally, he reached for the envelope, his fingers trembling slightly as he broke the seal. The letter inside was written in Liv's familiar handwriting, those slightly slanted letters that danced across the page. Dear Ethan, by the time you read this, you'll know who I really am, or maybe who the world thinks I am. The truth is somewhere in between, I guess. I never meant to lie to you. When I came to Westlake, the plan was simple. Keep my head down, be invisible, recover from the mess my life had become. No close friendships, no complications, just a temporary escape. Then you called Westlake hell on my first day, and something about your honesty, about the way you didn't try to impress me or pretend things were better than they were, felt like the first real thing I'd encountered in years. I should have told you the truth sooner. I know that. I thought about it so many times, especially after the night we watched the meteor shower. But I was afraid that knowing would change how you saw me. Afraid that I'd lose the one person who actually saw me, not the character I play, not the image on magazine covers, just Liv. The girl who loves rainy days and banana bread, and the way you talk about stars like they're old friends. The irony is that by trying to preserve our friendship through silence, I ended up damaging it with lies. I'm so sorry, Ethan. More sorry than I can express in words. I'm leaving tomorrow, going back to face the media storm I created by quitting the show. But before I go, I need you to know one thing with absolute certainty. Every moment of our friendship was real. Every conversation, every laugh, every shared secret, except the big one, obviously. You showed me what it feels like to be accepted for exactly who you are, and that's a gift I can never repay. Whatever you decide, whether to forgive me or forget me, know that you've changed my life irrevocably, Ethan Parker. You taught me that being real is better than being perfect. That true connection is worth more than 1 million followers or fans. That sometimes the person who seems invisible to everyone else is actually the only one really worth seeing. I'll miss the stars most of all. Not the ones in Hollywood, the ones you showed me, vast and eternal and honest, like you. Always your friend, if you'll have me. Olivia, but always live to you. Ethan read the letter twice, then a third time, feeling the anger and hurt gradually giving way to understanding. The Liv he knew, the one who remembered details about his interests, who brought him banana bread, who chose stargazing over parties, that person wasn't a lie. The connection between them, unlikely as it seemed, had been genuine. He reached for his phone, scrolling through the dozens of unread messages from Liv. The most recent had come just an hour ago. Flight leaves at 11:30 tomorrow morning. I understand if you don't want to talk. Just know that meeting you was the best thing that happened to me in Westlake. In a long time, actually. Take care of yourself, Ethan." His fingers hovered over the screen, a war of emotions raging inside him. Pride urged him to maintain his silence, to protect himself from further hurt. But beneath the pride was something stronger, the recognition of a friendship worth fighting for, worth forgiving for. Before he could change his mind, he typed, "What airport?" The airport terminal buzzed with the usual chaos of departures and arrivals, harried travelers rushing to gates, emotional reunions at baggage claim, the constant drone of announcements over the PA system. Ethan navigated through the crowd, heart pounding as he followed the signs to the security checkpoint. He had never been inside an airport before. The vastness of it, the sense of transience and possibility, made his mission seem simultaneously more urgent and more foolish. What was he doing here? What did he expect to happen? As he approached the security line, he spotted them immediately. Liv and her mother standing slightly apart from the other travelers. Liv wore large sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low, an obvious attempt at anonymity that was belied by the two men in suits hovering nearby. Security, Ethan realized with a jolt. This was her reality. The need for disguises and bodyguards. The inability to stand in an airport without the risk of being recognized and mobbed. For the first time, he truly understood what she had meant about Westlake being an escape. He hesitated, suddenly uncertain. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe some gulfs were too wide to bridge. The bullied nobody and the famous actress. Two worlds that could never truly intersect. But before he could retreat, Liv looked up and saw him. Even from a distance, he could see the way her entire body tensed, then relaxed. Hope and uncertainty playing across her features as she said something to her mother and started walking toward him. They met in the middle of the terminal, other travelers flowing around them like a river parting around stones. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of everything that had happened hanging between them. "You came," she finally said, her voice soft with disbelief. "I got your mom's letter," he replied. "And your texts." Liv nodded, removing her sunglasses to reveal eyes rimmed with shadows of fatigue. "I meant every word." "I know," he said, and realized as he spoke that he did know. The hurt hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something more complex. An understanding that sometimes honesty came at great personal cost, and that Liv had been protecting something precious in her deception. "That's why I'm here." Relief washed over her face, followed quickly by regret. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I never meant for it to become such a big lie. At first, it was just easier not to explain. And then, the longer I waited, the harder it got," he finished for her. "I get it. I'm not saying it was right, but I understand why you did it." She bit her lip, looking younger and more vulnerable than he had ever seen her. "Does this mean you forgive me?" The question hung between them, weighty with possibility. Ethan thought about the past 2 months, about banana bread and meteor showers, about the way his world had expanded beyond survival into something that actually felt like living, about the girl who had seen something in him worth knowing when he had forgotten it himself. "I'm working on it," he said honestly. "But I think friendship, real friendship, is worth the work." Tears welled in her eyes and she quickly blinked them away. "I don't deserve you, Ethan Parker." "Probably not," he agreed with a small smile. "But you're stuck with me anyway. At least long distance." Her answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds, warm and bright and genuine in a way that no red carpet photo could ever capture. "Long-distance friendships can work," she said, hope threading through her voice. "And I'll be back. Not permanently, but my mom and I talked about keeping the house here, a retreat from Hollywood when things get too intense." "Really?" She nodded. "This place, you, reminded me who I am when the cameras are off. I don't want to lose that again." The final boarding call for her flight echoed through the terminal, and Liv glanced over her shoulder to where her mother was gesturing urgently. "I have to go," she said reluctantly. "I know," Ethan replied, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. "Go be Olivia Lawrence. Show them how amazing you are." She hesitated, then stepped forward to hug him quickly, fiercely. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder, "for seeing me." Then she was gone, rushing toward the security checkpoint where her mother waited. At the last moment, she turned back, calling across the distance. "Watch the sky for me." Ethan raised his hand in farewell, smiling despite the ache in his chest. "Always," he called back, not caring who heard or saw. As he walked out of the airport into the bright June sunshine, his phone buzzed with a notification. A new message from Liv. No, from Olivia Lawrence, the contact now updated to her real name. Already missing Westlake Sky. Send star pictures? And maybe finally come visit LA when school's out? Mom says you can stay in our guest room. The invitation sent a thrill of possibility through him. A doorway opening to a world he had never imagined entering. Yet somehow it felt less intimidating than it would have 2 months ago. Before Liv had taught him that being seen didn't have to mean being judged. That being himself, star-loving, awkward, earnest Ethan Parker, could be enough. More than enough. He typed back, "Only if you promise to wear a disguise to the tourist attractions? I hear Hollywood is full of celebrities. Wouldn't want you getting recognized." Her response came immediately, "Deal. Baseball cap and sunglasses. Works every time, except with you." As he pocketed his phone and headed toward the bus stop, Ethan felt lighter than he had in days. The hurt wasn't completely gone, and forgiveness would take time to fully blossom. But the connection between them, the real, unexpected friendship that had transformed both their lives, remained intact. Different now, perhaps. More complicated, certainly, but also stronger for having weathered its first real storm. And as he boarded the bus back to Westlake, Ethan realized something that made him smile despite everything. For the first time in years, he was looking forward to returning to school tomorrow, to facing whatever new whispers and stares awaited him, not with fear, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knew his own worth, who had been truly seen and found not wanting. The bullied kid who had befriended a famous actress in disguise. It sounded like the plot of a TV show, something too fantastical to be real. Yet the most unbelievable part wasn't that Olivia Lawrence had walked the halls of Westlake High. It was that, in doing so, she had helped Ethan Parker find the courage to walk them too, head held high, no longer invisible. Sometimes the greatest transformations came from the most unexpected connections. And sometimes, Ethan thought as he watched the familiar landscape of his town slide past the bus window, those connections were worth fighting for, worth forgiving for, no matter how they began.